It's time for the question of the week, and today we are talking about name, image, and likeness, or as you know, NIL. And the question of the week is, does NIL impact player development? You dang right it does. But as most of you all know, impact can be positive and impact can be negative. So I will give you my aspect on the positive impact NIL has in player development and the negative impact NIL has with player development. So, all right, here we go. Positively. NIL came out. I was thoroughly pleased. I can't speak enough about seeing, so many players play the game and half of the stadiums wearing their jerseys or their images here, people printing out shirts with their face, making money, and they can't make money, get a slice of pizza, whatever, and they're ineligible. So I was so excited for that. But I was really, truly excited about NIL and what it created, because once I understood what it was and understood that these players have to do taxes, understand that these players have to, will in some cases have to create LLCs, S Corps, things like this. It was important for me because it's like, man, this is the stuff we want to teach these players anyway, because when I started, there was no NIL. We would tell them, hey, this stuff will help you in the future. But now you're bringing it to them now. So building an LLC, learning about taxes, learning about marketing, branding, different things like this that do help and can become transferable skills when they're done. That was huge. That was a huge positive that I saw NIL bringing. It's just that building of entrepreneurs, because a lot of people think NIL is just getting money. I'm not going to sit here and argue on that, argue with your mama, as they say. But there are, by rule, it is a lot of stuff that the players have to do, the athletes have to do to get that compensation, exposure, whatever it may be on the other side of an NIL deal. Now, the negative impact that I knew would happen with NIL for player development is it would push player development down the list of priorities. And I bring this up because in my role, it was always tough getting recruiting. So say recruiting is the lifeblood of football. Recruiting is the lifeblood. You got to get players in there, which is true. You got to get players to win. I get all that. And I used to be like, man, well, if recruiting is the lifeblood of the program, then player development has to be the veins of that, because it keeps, if you're developing players the right way in player development programs, you can retain players, you help players. So it has to be the vein that helps that lifeblood stay in there. But it was always tough. I never wanted to compete with recruiting because I knew that was a competition that I would never win. But at times, certain universities, I wanted to show people like, hey, recruiting's here, but we also need resources in player development, because you get the players on campus, but what do you do when you get the players on campus? There should be a merge. There should be some things. There's resources they're going to get. I understand they're going to get more resources, but there's resources here. Recruiting gets the 25 or more on campus. I'm handling the 120 that are on campus. So it was kind of this tug, and I had great relationships with everybody I work with in recruiting. Shout out to everybody I work in recruiting. But as time went on, I knew NIL was going to push player development, because I knew it was going to become NIL, recruiting, and then player development. And the other thing that's very, very weird that I found out from NIL, and it's not necessarily just fans, even administrators, there is something about a player making money where people see how much money they make and they think automatically they're developed. Like, if they're making, whatever money, I see someone comment on my thing, they're making $500,000. Everybody's not making $500,000. But let's say somebody does make $500,000. They're like, well, they don't need this. They don't need this. They're making $500,000. They got it all figured out. Don't you think if they're making $500,000, we need to have programs set up? We need to have player development initiatives, other things like that to help them with that money to understand what to do with it? But it's weird because it wasn't just fans. I saw it with even, different coworkers, like, so-and-so, he's good. He's making more than I'm making. It's like, well, no, like, that is still an 18 to 24-year-old that needs to be developed and helped in that space. But that was crazy. That was one thing. It was crazy to me because I didn't know what made people think having more money associates people with completion of like adulthood or of learning. But hey, that's neither here or there. So as you see, there's things there. Maybe I could do a whole podcast on this. I don't know. If you want me to do a whole podcast on this, put it in the comments wherever you're listening and say do a podcast on it. I'll do it. But there are positive impacts that NIL has on player development, and there's negative impacts that NIL has on player development. If you have any player development questions you want answered, put it in the comments. I would love to answer those for you. And you know what I'm going to say. Go out, create generational impact. Don't wait. Create that generational impact today. And if you're an athlete who's making that NIL money, hey, shout out to you. Keep doing it, but make sure you make this money. You're learning those skills because your career at some point will end, and you want to take those skills you've learned, those connections you've made, and the compensation you have, and allow that to help you in your later life. Have a great one.